It's time now for Perspective, and today's guest is the director of Play International, an NGO that uses sport to educate children about hard-hitting social issues. David Blough, thank you very much for coming to us to France 24. Your organisation says it's reached almost 1 million people worldwide since its creation in 1999. First of all, tell us a bit more about what Play International does.
Well, when you think sports, you think about what you might do this weekend or what game you're going to watch on TV. What we think and what we're doing is that we're using the power of sport to try to change lives. And we've been doing so for the past 20 years and finding different ways and inventing different ways of using sport to tackle social issues.
Now, we know that sport can promote leadership skills, teach children about winning and losing, etc. But your organisation is also tackling much more complex issues. Tell us a bit more about the kinds of things you're trying to tackle.
Yeah, one concrete example, and that was a game changer for me, is what we did in IT. And when you think IT after the earthquake, you think that sport can be quite superficial. And when you see how you can use sport to prevent cholera in those settings, you realize that there's such potential and so many different ways to use sport to tackle those social issues. So what we try to do today is invent methods, invent curriculums that will help educators, teachers to use sport to tackle the social issues they want to tackle.
Now, Play International is present in some 20 countries. Why do you think sport is such an effective educational tool?
I think to start out with, the sport is a universal language. So it's a great way to engage youth, to engage people. But then there's a huge potential in terms of what actually happens on the pitch. And we realized over the years that you could play with the rules, you could play with what happens on the pitch to help children learn and grow through sports. So if you add debates, if you had different techniques, then you use that universal language, that power of sport to tackle those social issues.
Now, I've also seen from some of your YouTube videos that you also go into the classroom, you go and educate children between 5 and 8 years old. How did you come up with this idea actually to bring sport into the classroom to educate children on things like inequality, discrimination, racism? How did that actually come about?
It happened on the field, and it happened while we were trying to tackle different issues, and we tried to invent things. And some things didn't work in some countries, some did. And when we had something that worked, we tried to modelize that and bring it to other countries as well. So I think it's definitely important to go in the classroom. It's also important to realize that you can teach outside of the classroom and go on the pitch and talk about health, talk about living together. So it's also a way of promoting a new way of educating and getting kids active as well.
And now, speaking for the children that aren't very athletic, how do you respond to those that don't respond well to this type of learning?
I think that the key word here is not sport, it's play, and it's the game. And we can create games and we can help children to play together. So it's not about competition. Competition is great, but it's about how do you actually create games that include everyone. And that's something that's definitely possible and that we should do much more.
Now, Play International also launched a program to promote social inclusion amongst refugees and the communities in Europe. How has that been received?
It has been received by the people we work with very well. We've had some criticism from people who might not agree with the fact that we need to welcome those people. But at the end of the day, they're here, and we need to find solutions to help them fit into society, to help them feel better. So we work with local nonprofits that they're trying to find a solution, and what we bring is method and ways and experience, our experience in ways that sport can help those people feel better and be included in society.
And do you think that this is a kind of program that should be introduced everywhere, not just in schools and, for example, small communities? Do you think it should actually be maybe available to adults, for example, the general public?
Definitely, and I think that we're only tapping in a very small percentage of what sport can actually bring to society. And I think that we need to shift from what we see on TV, that's great, all the games, the football players, to actually, okay, what can sport be in our neighborhood, and how can we use sport to find those solutions? And when we do that, we realize that it's so much more powerful than just the competition. So I think it's about shifting perspectives on sport.
Shifting perspectives on sport. Tell us more about how this has impacted, for example, gender equality, and trying to bridge the gap between that divide.
Well, during the last World Cup in France, we worked with the organization, and we trained all the educators from all the cities that were actually hosting the game on a curriculum based on gender equality. So today we have those 10 cities. We have 200 educators that are implementing education programs on gender equality through sport. So that's one example of how we can impact such important issues.
And now you were just touching on earlier about sort of your vision for what sport can do, and we're not tapping into the full potential. It's true that sport has often been described as the universal language, no matter what country, what race, color, creed, etc. It brings people together. Why do you think governments haven't really sort of harnessed the power of sport to create social cohesion? Why has it been left up to charities and NGOs to kind of take up the slack?
I think there's too much talk on the values of sport, and not on actually how sport can bring social in concrete change. And I think that the negative impact of that of those discussions around sport values, that you think that sport in itself will bring social change. We know from experience that that's not the case. You need methods, you need means, you need collaborations. And so that's where the focus should be turned to.
Okay, David Blough, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for coming in. Thank you very much for that.